Well, I'm back. Going to do the second half of the show, number 2, Life Lessons with Barbara. And thank you for sticking with me. I I'm not I'm not keeping up. I'm getting way behind. So what I'm going to do is really use my notes this time so that I can kind of move through. So I just finished the part about um, my my launch into the world of Washington, D.C. Okay, so that's how I got there. And lots of great things happened, especially in the first 3 years. I didn't uh, last long with United because, anyway, I chose not to stay in Virginia. That's another story I'd love to tell, but I don't have time. And preferred to stay in Washington, D.C., even though it was not very advantageous for me as a stewardess because I had to rely on unreliable transportation to get back and forth to work. But so I hung in there and I had some pretty great experiences. But okay, so what I got to tell you is a couple of life lessons that happened when I made that call to my mom. First, she said, and I begging to come home, and I was going to ask her to ask Susie Buffett for the money. I was desperate. And she said, you would be very disappointed in yourself if you didn't find a way to make this work out for you, or something to that effect. And she was right. I would come home with all the bragging and, I didn't brag, but with all my enthusiasm about getting this job to turn around and go back home after successfully completing training, it didn't sit well either. But the reality was I had no place to stay. I just had a few more days in that hotel, and I was going to be out there on the street, literally. So anyway, that was the first lesson. And then the second one was, she said, pray. And, I'm going like, give me something I can work with. Come on, let's think of something, because that didn't resonate for me. But it turned out that was all I could do. So after I got off the phone with my mom, I did just that. I prayed as best I could, and as hard as I could, and nothing happened right away, of course. And so a couple of days later, I was deadheading back from a trip, and I was on this plane, and this girl comes up and she says, she's a Black stewardess, which was still very, very rare. There had been, they had done a lot of recruiting, so but I had been flying a lot, and I didn't see any in the airports. I didn't see any on the planes. I didn't work with any other ones, so it was really kind of a shock to see her. She came over to me because I was in uniform and asked me, was I the girl who didn't have a place to stay? And she offered me her place. And I looked up at her and I could just see this halo forming over her head. I said, God sent me an angel. This praying is good stuff. And she told me that she had a small efficiency, but with both of us flying on different schedules, that there wouldn't be a lot of times when we would be, lit there at the same time. So if that was okay with me, she would, she was opening her home to me, a little small efficiency, and I was just thrilled. I was, oh my goodness, you have no idea. Maybe you do. So I just couldn't wait to let my mom know I was staying. I had someplace to stay and all of that. And so I get to her place and I walk in and I see these stacks of albums from the floor up as almost as tall as me, which ain't all that tall, but stacked up 4 feet high, almost 5 feet high. I'm thinking, oh wow, we gonna party up in here. And of course, I was still nursing my little drinking habit and smuggling, those little tiny bottles of liquor home with me. And I thought, wow, she ain't here. I'll kick back, put on me some Delphonics and just be in my own groove. Well, after a closer look, they turned out to be all gospel. And it turned out that Jackie, the girl who was so gracious and opened her home to me, was a very religious girl. She was, in the truest sense, a Christian. She acted it, she talked it, she walked it. And I was really, impressed by her. And so that worked out. I was, because I was brand new, and I have to say that Washington, D.C. was a very senior base, a very popular base for stewardesses. So you had to be one for at least 5 years before you could get a regular routine flight schedule and that sort of thing. 5 years. But anyway, those are just some of there's tons of stories about my life as a stewardess, the whole 11 months that I could hold on to that job. Anyway, so eventually I lost the job, but I was in love with Washington, D.C., and I wasn't going nowhere. And so the next job I got was with a law firm, Keller and Heckman. And as a receptionist, now there were a couple of women that worked downstairs, and they were in charge of supplies and copying and all that, and filing and all of that went on downstairs. So I got to know them. They were from Ethiopia, Regina and Yeshu. And I call Yeshu Yeshi, anyway. And both of them were married to Americans. Yeshi's husband was somewhere and Regina's husband was retired from the military, but he was in medical school. So in the evenings, she wanted to get out of his hair so that he could study. And so we would go out a lot of times to the NCO club and sometimes to the Ethiopian embassy and party. And it was hanging out with them that I got introduced to the martini. Now, my first introduction was that, it was made with gin and sense. And this is I have to kind of flip back to tell you this. Although I got, I really tried, I really was a big girl about Reggie coming back with a wife and on a 4-year-old daughter. And I made it a point to be friendly and nice, and so, and I even babysat for them a couple of times and snooped around and stuff. But otherwise, the little girl was just adorable, and I just had nothing but love for her. So anyway, that's kind of the way it went. Thank God for Anthony, and in a whole nother life that I didn't have to, be exposed to his happiness on a regular basis. So, but anyway, there was this time. It was on a Sunday, and you couldn't buy liquor on a Sunday. So, myself and I was with about 3 or 4 other people. We were working at part-time at OIC at the time, Opportunities Industrialization Center, and it's a whole nother story. But anyway, we were looking for alcohol, and so there was this guy who, he just had a nice setup at his home. And so they went to get a bottle of alcohol so that we could, sit around and drink it and get high, play cards, And they came, and all they could get was a bottle of gin from this guy. And I drank that gin, and I got tore up drunk, and I couldn't even, I blacked out. And during this blackout, apparently I called Reggie's wife on the phone, and I cussed her out for wearing the same dress the same color dress. I mean, it wasn't even the same dress, but we were both in sort of a peach colored outfit at the last party I saw her at. And I went off on her about that. Now, this I got secondhand because I didn't remember a thing. I didn't remember doing it or anything. So, you know, the most logical thing to do at that point was to swear off gin, right? So, back to DC and hanging out with my Ethiopian friends. I told them I like the idea of a martini. I like the glass you drink it out of. It's really classy and, you know, you could feel really sophisticated. But I had sworn off gin and I swore I'd never drink that stuff again. And they said, oh, well, you just get it made with vodka. So that became my favorite drink, vodka martinis. And so we sit at the club or wherever we were and I'd sip on my vodka martinis. I remember one time my girlfriend, my mom came to visit, and these girls, and there was Yeshi and Regina were just two of many. So sometimes when they would have parties, I would meet a lot of their friends, and so they had a party, and I think it was in honor of my mom. So my mom comes, and they just spoil her rotten. And one good thing that came out of that, something I always had craved ever since I was a little kid, is that they hugged on her so much. I mean, that she loved it. So I started hugging on her too. And from that point on, my mom was finally a hugger. So, I mean, that may not mean a lot, but it was something that meant a lot to me. So I'm really grateful for them in a lot of ways. So the first 3 years was party, loving the city, just exposed to all different cultures. And I mean, it was so rich and exciting. And plus living, I forgot. I forgot this is a big thing. Okay, after I moved out of Jackie's house, after I moved out of her apartment, I finally got my own place. It took a while because it was a senior base. I was on call 2 months out of 3. And on call, you cannot make any money. And the base pay was really minuscule. So it took a while for me to make up enough money to get in a place. So finally, I find this place facing 16th Street. I think it was 1400 16th Street Northwest. I remember. So, and so I got to tell you about this. It was a small efficiency, and it had a Murphy bed. That was cool because I didn't have to buy a bed. There was watch the time. Oh, okay. I got about 10 more minutes. Okay. And there was a Murphy bed and all of that. But I had nothing. I had nothing else. So, and one other cool thing, even though it was not, you know, an upscale place at all, you know, if I could afford it, but there was security. They had a doorman, they had switchboard operator, and a guard on duty 24/7. And I got to know the doorman, and he knew my situation, that I had nothing because I was always going out to a restaurant for meals. And so one day I was home in my little place, and I got this knock on the door. And I opened the door, and here's this little bit of nothing. She wasn't even as tall as my grandmother. And she had with her a sheet, a pillow, pillowcase, one plate, one fork, one knife, one spoon, you know, and all the things, a set of towels, all the things that I needed. And she, it turns out her name was Beverly, and her name still is Beverly. And she was about, I think, 7 or 8 years older than me. So, you know, as little as she was, she still thought she was the boss of me. And I loved her. She was like a big sister. A big sister I always wanted, never had. So that was Beverly, and that's when I met her. And so being on 16th Street Northwest, I was right in, you know, I mean, any demonstration against the Vietnam War or anything stupid that Nixon did, because he was in the White House then, would happen right in front of my place. And so Beverly was in another area of this building, and then we had a third person who made up the Three Musketeers that we were. And that was Alice, and she was from like South Dakota or something, and she was in rebellion against her family. And one thing that, the I think she was Mormon, or yeah, I think it was Mormon, teaches that, Black people are inferior. And so she wasn't hearing it, didn't accept that, and her and Beverly were really close friends. And then they kind of brought me in, and so there we were. And Alice was very tall white girl, and kind of on the husky side. I mean, she was at least 5'10". So can you imagine the three of us hanging out? but we had fun. And anytime there was a demonstration going on, I'd get on, going through the switchboard, I'd call them and tell them, hey, there's a demonstration going on, because they would be marching right down in front of my place. And we would run down and get on and stuff. And just, walking along and like, okay, so what are we marching for? What's this demonstration about? Oh gosh, that was fun, that life. But anyway, and then, well, needless to say, I didn't hold that job. Well, maybe about a year and a half or so, I think. I don't remember exactly, but I lost the job at the law firm too, because, being a receptionist, you're supposed to be there on time on a regular basis and all of that. And you're not supposed to make personal long distance calls on their phone, and, stuff like that. And so I was busted and fired. And, but like I said, never had any problems getting a job. And this time, Beverly was the one that got me the next job. She worked for the Department of Labor, and they had this pilot program to train low-income people in real estate sales. And that's where I met my first husband, working on that project. So I'm going to end this part now, tell you a little bit about that marriage, and also coming up would be my second marriage. I'll talk about that a little bit. And one of the biggest and most important accomplishments of my life happened shortly or during that second marriage. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you.
Well, I wish I could say that that was a match made in heaven, but hell was more like it. One biggie lesson learned for me was to know the person you're marrying, and that takes time. So my first husband was in the program that I was working on, the real estate sales training program, and I was at a point. I was almost 20. I was 24 years old. Most of my friends already had kids, so I never was all that keen on marriage, but I really wanted to have a child, and this guy impressed me so much. Later, I found out that he was a certified sociopath. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it's the type of person who is usually very appealing, very charming, charismatic, and they seem to read you real well. They can kind of sense what you're feeling and speak to it and all of that. And it was something that I was very receptive to at the time. And he himself wanted to have a child. He had been married, I think, about 7 years, and they never could conceive. So the logical thing to me was to get married. However, we only knew each other for a total of 5 months. I did take him home so my mother and my friends could meet him, and he got their seal of approval, and we got married, and it was hellish. um, and it ended violently. He decided that he wanted to teach me a lesson, I guess, and he hit me so hard it knocked me over the back of the couch. And as I was flipping over in the air, or at some point soon after, I remembered what my grandmother said. She said, if he hits you once, he'll hit you again. So I was gone the next day. I was not interested in sticking around and get hit again. But out of that, it was horrible, but out of that came something beautiful, something wonderful. And for that reason, I wouldn't change it. And that's my daughter, Shawnee. She has brought me nothing but pride and two gorgeous grandchildren. No, I wouldn't change that at all. And I want to say a little bit about my second husband that I married just 10 years later. By that time, I was really out of control with the drinking. So lo and behold, I reconnect with Anthony. It sounded like a good idea to me. Well, let me say a little bit about what was going on over that 10-year period. Definitely my drinking was progressing. I worked for IBM for about 7 years. Had a 5-year relationship with a guy named Jerry, who also worked for IBM, and we kind of hung out with about 5 other couples. One of the couples was a Puerto Rican couple, John and Lisa, and the others were white. Not that that matters, but we were all really pretty close knit. We did everything together. Um, we joined the softball team, and we bowled in the winter, and celebrated each other's birthdays, and had other opportunities to get together. So it was a fun time, and Jerry kind of kept me stable. He was the ideal codependent, if you know what that is. But then after that ended, I changed jobs. I left IBM, and not in a nice way. I filed a discrimination complaint against my boss, and was able to get a pretty nice little severance package that I could kind of live off of for a while. While I went to school, I took a course in real estate and got my license. Now, it wasn't a good idea for me to be driving around by myself in the condition I'd be in most of the time, let alone driving other people. So I always figured I had some guardian angel just watching over me. And like I said before in the earlier one about babies, God looks after fools too. Thank goodness for me. So that's kind of what was going on, and I got to a point where I didn't want to be responsible for myself anymore, and so who else would I look for? Somebody I knew for years, and somebody I thought really cared about me, but mostly it was someone I knew would never allow there to be a shortage of booze in the house. And by that time, my habit had gotten so bad that was my first and only priority. Oh, while I was in real estate, I bought a house. And I moved my mom in. Wasn't so crazy about what was happening in her neighborhood. And of course, my daughter was with us. And then that sister I told you about, Deborah, she showed up at our doorstep. with a baby boy, Savalas. So I had a house of full of 5 folks. And then Anthony and I got married. And shortly after that, his wife gave him custody of the kids. So with a full house and 3 kids that did not get along, um, all I could do is just find places to hide like I used to do when I was a kid until I got sober. And that's when the real miracle happened in my life. The deal was I was supposed to go into treatment. And then when I came out, then Anthony would go. Well, needless to say, he did not go. He never honored that, and I knew I couldn't stay in that marriage as long as he was actively drinking. But that was the best thing after my daughter's birth, of course. That was the very best thing that could have ever happened to me. And when I got back from treatment, Anthony and I had been married only about 2 or 3 months. And he wasn't too crazy about me in my sober state. And we were not getting along at all. So after about 6 months, we ended that marriage. And because I was so miserable and unhappy in the marriage, I was so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous. I think I might have fallen back into the drinking and never see the light of day again. So I thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I did marry a 3rd time. And like they say, the 3rd time's a charm. I married an old friend. And that was John, the Puerto Rican couple I told you about earlier during my time at IBM. Well, we reconnected after, oh my goodness, I don't know how many years it was. But it was about 11 years after my marriage ended with Anthony that I married John. Just want to tell you a little bit about my life as a sober woman. I really grew up then, became much more responsible. I went back and finished my undergraduate degree, and I got certified as a substance abuse counselor. In Omaha, they call that an addiction, a chemical dependency counselor. Anyway, it's all the same. You're helping people who've gotten caught up in a mood-altering drug, which includes alcohol, of course. I got into community theater. I sang over those years with 2 different groups. One, we're still very much sisters to this day, and that was the Uplift Singers. And I love that. I think we sang together about 7 years. Just life was good. Life was wonderful. And I learned to like me. And so by the time I reconnect with John, I'm in a really good place. And by that time I had a little more than about 11 years of sobriety, and maybe 3 or 4 more months left in my graduate school program. And my daughter was away at school in Pennsylvania, her first year in college, her first year of many. Things were going pretty good for me, but not as good for John. He was going through his second divorce, and they had been married about 11 years, and they had three really beautiful children between them. And but it was not an easy divorce, and there were a lot of snafus and and extensions of time and stuff like that. So um, that was a little bit challenging, but we hung in there. And once the decision to relocate happened, then we were okay. And that was the plan, and that's what we did. We relocated to North Carolina after we got married. Um, One thing that did happen to, kind of, life it has its ups and its downs. And I lost my mother during that period. In my 9th year of sobriety, she died. And I just can't describe the pain of losing her. It was devastating. But I was sober, and I was able to drop that 9-year chip. They hand out chips for every year you're sober. And I put that chip in my mom's coffin. And I was so grateful to have been able to do that. 9 years, she got to see me okay. She got to see me responsible. She got to see me happy. There were no more major relationships. I focused on being a parent and being a good daughter and caring for my mother as her health declined. Um, and then along comes John, someone I had known for many years. And it was now I would say that was a match made in heaven. Heaven for me lasted about 16 out of the 17 years that we were together. It was the best extended period of my life. And I didn't mention this before, but John was not full Puerto Rican. He was half Puerto Rican. And on his mom's side, his mother was German. And so not only was I finally mature enough to experience real love, but I was also blessed with a huge family with every color in the rainbow, and a very loving family, and many I'm still in touch with to this day. The marriage ended because it was just time to end, and sometimes you don't get to travel the whole distance with people you care about. Sometimes they have other things they need to do, and likewise for you. So that's kind of the way that went. No regrets now. It was tough, but the way it ended was very hurtful, and it took me quite a while. And thank God for friends. My best friend for over 60 years, Lois Lady McMorris. She got me through the worst initial shock of it all. And also a newer friend that I met here in North Carolina, Jackie. She was very helpful. She was right here, so I could get hugs when I needed them. And then, of course, there was Big Sister Beverly. But I got a lot of help when I discovered my church, Unity, Church of the Triangle. But just the new thought
And all that, finally, I was able to reconcile, find a church home with people who believe the same way I do. And wow, what a blessing. If that was what I had to trade, that marriage for this spiritual community, I think I did okay. No matter what happens in your life, know that it is something that you can use to your betterment if you accept and if you make every effort to learn what it is you're supposed to learn from that experience. So that's my life lesson for now. And until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in to Life Lessons with Barbara. And remember, you can watch what you just heard on my website, BEJ-Associates.com. And when you get there, please send me a question or a comment so I can get to know you and what you want to hear. So now here's Lady Mac again with After the Rain. To download, go to BEJ-Associates.com. Namaste.